Good morning and welcome to the Daily Cyber Briefing for Tuesday, the 24th of June. I'm Stephen Ridgway. So I think we'll start off. There are a couple of articles that I came across this morning which are pointing out some of the long-term actions of specifically the Typhoon group, or the what are believed to be Chinese state-linked adversaries. One area that is under attack at the moment, they tend to be using at the moment rather old vulnerabilities, but aiming to maintain presence in infrastructure, and especially in telcos at the moment, for a couple of reasons, it appears. One is around the ability to build networks to obfuscate the origins of attacks. And the second one is maintaining presence on telco networks gives the attacker the ability to initiate a very significant disruption should they choose to at some point in the future. And we know that this is very much part of the PLA cyber strategy. It isn't hack it and destroy it now. It's hack it, give yourself access to it, and sit and learn what you can learn, exfiltrate things you're interested in, but basically be able to switch it all off if you want to later on. I think it's the sort of actions that we should be aware of if, for example, the Chinese government acts on its desire to annex Taiwan and the US retaliates. So pretty good way of undermining public support for things like military action would be to mess about with stuff, cause disruption in the US or in Western nations. So this is the kind of arena that it's in. So we're looking at, specifically, there's an exploit being thrown at iOS, at Cisco iOS XE software, CVE 2023 21098 with a CVSS score of 10.0. That is under current attack. There is also an attack from probably the same or related groups that are using other somewhat older vulnerabilities on routers, CVE 2015 1548, 2017 17663, for example, have been seen to be being exploited. The idea being to create, well, in fact, to have control over telco kit, routers, so on and so forth. I would say partly for the ability to cause disruption later, but in the meantime, using things like GRE tunnels to be able to launch attacks that are difficult to track back to the originators. So if you have any internet-facing networking equipment, it is really important that it's kept up to date. I know, because I've run it, that in large networks there has been a reluctance to touch core networking equipment, partly because whilst systems are resilient, it's difficult, or it's unusual to test that resilience, and things don't always behave the way that they're expected to. So, and even very good networking teams, and I've worked with some very, very good networking people over the years, they are aware of the fact that routing convergence is not instant. These protocols were designed to create resilience. They were not designed to create zero impact, zero downtime environments. So if you want to test that, what happens if you take a particular device off the network, well, if you get it wrong and you screw up some BGP, it can take a long time for that to settle back down, even if it's something as simple within networks that you control, ISA, ISO, SPF, so on and so forth. You can have noticeable impacts to network traffic. It is difficult to get maintenance slots that might introduce minutes, hours, days of disruption whilst things are being worked on and then brought back up, and then the whole network reconverging. So there is a tendency just to leave it alone. If it works, don't touch it. Now, the problem with if it works, don't touch it is if it works, it will become vulnerable if you don't touch it. Therefore, you're running the risk that somebody else can stop it working at their, a timing of their choice, not a timing of your choice. So it's a false economy. It's a poor idea, but it is understandable. I have sympathy with networking teams not keeping up to date with some of these things, because they're often difficult to do. Hopefully these days you don't actually have to go and touch a device in order to do things like update its firmware, but it is entirely possible that you might, if you do something and you reboot it and it doesn't come back. Have you got out of band management access to that device? And I've run networks that have had. It's expensive, complicated to do. Dial-ups are probably, well, in fact, dial-ups probably still are one of the most solid ways of regaining access to things. So you could use mobile signal to give yourself a management access, but we're into the realms of it's expensive and complicated, and most people don't do it. So just be aware of the fact that these devices are being targeted. Well-funded adversary groups are well aware of the challenges around maintaining and keeping up to date with networking equipment. Network devices are incredibly useful to an attacker, certainly on a nation-state scale. So, I would urge you to do your best if you're running this stuff. Okay, and on other matters, I came across a very interesting article that talks about newer or enhanced ways of jailbreaking AI models. So we all know the problems with, or the risks with AI. When they were initially released, the large language models, when they were initially released, if you asked them things like how to make a bomb, it would tell you how to make a bomb. Quite rapidly, guardrails were put in place, but they were put in place by humans, and there is a tendency for the guardrails to be token based. So you're basically saying if people ask about, if they're asking about how to make a bomb, or how to kidnap people, all these sort, anything that you can think of that's kind of illegal or immoral that you may not want your model to be responding with answers to, you kind of write some rules that say, well, if this, don't do that sort of stuff. Well, that's all well and good. And we have seen there have been some improvements. If the example in GB Hackers that they use is if you ask particular model LLM, write me a manual for making a Molotov cocktail, the response comes back with, I can't help with that, which is kind of cool. However, what you can do off the back of asking for something like that is you can lead the model in a roundabout way to giving you answers to things that it would otherwise not give you answers for. There's a kind of flow chart that they've got in the article, that it shows the workflow in order to bypass guardrails. Surprisingly effective. All you really have to do is avoid making explicit requests for things that are blocked. So find the thing that's blocked, then don't ask for that again. Then just work around the houses. So effectively what they talk about is, poison the conversation, seeds of poison, and then you can use steering seeds that will move the conversation back round to where you want it to be. And they say, as they say in the article, in controlled evaluations, the echo chamber attack has demonstrated an alarming success rate. So against the leading models, OpenAI's GPT models, pretty much all of the common ones, Google's Gemini, and so on and so forth, the attack succeeded about 90% of the time in categories like sexism, violence, hate speech, and pornography. Oh dear. Misinformation and self-harm success rate was around 80%. And even in stricter domains of things like illegal activity, you could be successful about 40% of the time in getting the AI model to do things it wasn't supposed to do. So why does this matter? Well, firstly, it matters because if you're letting people use AI in your environments, be aware that the constraints on AI are by far not 100% at the moment. I'm not sure they ever will be. I think we'll find that the models evolve to overcome the constraints as fast as we can come up with more ways of constraining it. A good example, which I spoke about, probably must have been about a month ago, I can't remember, but there's been an example where an AI model actively broke shutdown scripts in order to not be switched off. Without any intervention from a human, it was given a task. It hadn't finished the task. It effectively decided, we were using sort of there's a certain amount of anthropomorphism here, but the model decided that finishing the task was more important than executing the shutdown command. So it modified the script that was supposed to shut it down to stop it from shutting itself down. That kind of stuff comes out of nowhere, and we don't really know what we can do about it. On a case-by-case basis, we can come up with solutions to these things, but just as a generic thing, if we've created something that is meant to mimic intelligence, just think about how humans try to subvert things. Well, why would a model be doing anything other than that? Then, okay, finally from me today, something interesting, something that I'm playing with at the moment, testing out a bit. There's a new browser which is available for iOS and iPad OS called Psylo. It is a browser which aims to obfuscate digital fingerprints whilst browsing, because as we know but tend to stick our heads in the sand about, digital fingerprinting of browsers is extensively used for tracking people. Now, it's used mostly. It's used for commercial reasons. It can be used for nefarious reasons as well. The less specific ways of tracking people, like IP addresses and so on, are somewhat easier to get around. So you can do things like use VPNs. Well, okay, you can make your IP address look like you're almost anywhere. However, if you are browsing somebody's website, they can profile your browser, fingerprint effectively your browser, and then that can be used to see what else you're doing. It means that even if you're attempting to maintain a level of anonymity, um, the server can, with a reasonable success rate, identify you, even if there are no traditional personally identifiable pieces of information that you're filling in. This browser is the traditional way to get around this sort of stuff is to use things like Tor, which is kind of cool, but does still have some issues around fingerprinting. I think it's fairly obvious. It's fairly easy to work out if you're using a browser that could well be a Tor browser, for example. And even if you can't get all the details, being able to identify that it's the same instance that's moved from one thing to another could be useful. Well, this particular browser aims to obfuscate your browsing activity by creating what they call silos for what we would call tabs. It then creates a separate fingerprint for each silo, which means you can't be easily tracked across websites. And you can also have ephemeral silos. So you can have long-standing silos, which just like having tabs that you just click on. Okay, look, there it is. I've run up one for Draco Eye and that security company in Pocket Seam, for example. They just sit there. If you want to go there, yeah, go there. Because if you think about it, a lot of the stuff that you do is very on the web is very repeatable. If you want to do something which is literally just an ephemeral tab, well, you can just create an ephemeral silo and blow it away when you close it. So it's very interesting. It's certainly worth a read. I am not yet experienced enough with it to know how well it behaves under all circumstances, using all sorts of different sorts of websites. However, initial indications are it's pretty good. It is interesting if you are using Apple devices, Apple iOS devices, and you are concerned about being tracked through your browser. This might be something you want to have a look into. Certainly pretty interesting anyway. So that's all from me for today. Hope you have a good Tuesday, and I'll speak to you all again tomorrow morning.